lovely people, thank you so much for joining the session once again. We are here with another video for social studies and we're going to talk about the first chapter from history, class 10th, the rise of nationalism in Europe. Yes, this is that chapter that talks and takes a lot from you, probably expects a lot of cramming. You have to remember a lot of dates, you have to remember the independent struggle of all the countries, talk about romanticism, and then also position and talk about allegory, how the people probably associated themselves with the feeling of nationalism. Okay, so let's get started and talk about all the important questions that you guys can expect from this particular chapter. Those who've opted this instead of the second chapter, Indochina. Now guys, there's a proper strategy that you have to follow when you have to answer a question. It's not just you get the question and you jump onto the answer sheet, start writing everything there and then. It's like you have to channelize your energy so that you can answer it the right way. So okay, let's get started with the first set of question in this case. So the very first question is, Napoleon had no doubt destroyed democracy in France, but in the administrative field he had incorporated revolutionary principles. Now the point you are supposed to focus in this case is administrative field. No doubt this person had done a lot of destruction, created a lot of terror, destroyed democracies around the world. Once he was considered as harbinger of prosperity and then he shattered everybody's dream, but he did something good for the people, and we're going to talk about it in this answer, that he had incorporated revolutionary principles in order to make whole system more rational and efficient. So you have to support your answer or the statement given here. Now, whenever it comes to Napoleon, so Napoleon was this person who was crowned as the Emperor of France, and once he was crowned, he was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo by the countries, which you can remember it by PRAB. That's Prussia, Russia, Austria, Britain. Of course, you're not going to support this clause in this statement, but just an easy trick to remember, like one of my sister is named Probable, so it's very easy for me to correlate Probable with the defeat of Napoleon. This is how you associate history or historical events with your real life events, right? So Probable defeated Napoleon, and you know what Probable stands for, right? Okay, second important thing that we're going to focus here is BPL. So when it comes to Napoleon, I'm going to talk about something that's BPL, and we're going to see to it what I mean to say when I talk about BPL. So I'm going to drop a very small hint for you guys. BPL has something to do with this code, and I know you people are pretty smart to understand that yes, there was a code introduced in 1804, introduced by Napoleon, known as Napoleonic Code, and that talked about three important stuff, that is BPL. Okay, so how are we going to go around when it comes to the answer? See, either you give a very good introduction that Napoleon was crowned as the Emperor of France, and initially he was welcomed by the countries or all the countries in Europe, because he was sort of considered as a harbinger and he's going to bring a lot of prosperity. But eventually people came to realize that no, he's actually destroying the democracy, he's doing into forced recruitment, pushing people, taking away their rights and stuff like that. So you're going to give a very good introduction related, like 2 points related to France and Napoleon. Then you're going to start your answer that yes, he did incorporate some basic changes in the administrative field that brought a big revolution in the countries across the globe, or maybe Europe for that matter. So now 2 ways to attempt. The very first practice that you guys are supposed to follow is, please answer your question in bullet, or maybe if not bullet, at least you can number them out. This way it's going to make your answer visible and it's going to fetch you more marks, the appropriate number of marks. Imagine there's khichdi placed right in front of you that has good nutritional value, like all the pulses, leguminous stuff there, and on the other hand you have, you know, probably pulses, chapatis, rice, you know, differently offered to you in different sections. So you would probably fetch, you know, get attracted towards a plate that offers you a variety. So the same case applies for the teacher who's going to evaluate your answer. Is khichdi is not going to make sense to them. They'll find or they struggle a lot when it comes to evaluation, and some cuisine that has been offered in different you know, plate in different sections would fetch more attention. So that is the case. That's the best example I can give you in this case. So how you're going to present your cuisine or maybe your answer so that it gives a clear image of who the person you are, what's your personality. So let's start about this. So in administrative field, Napoleon introduced many revolutionary principles. That's not going to be a pointer, that's going to be the heading. In any way you can remove this. Now let's talk about the very first point. Either you write it this way, that he sort of modernized the traditional institutions to make the state function well, to make the state get more effective and strong, and underline something here, modernize traditional institute. Similarly, in this point you can underline modern army. So you've underlined two important things. The second way to opt or attempt this question is, you guys can start your answer that he had, you know, modernized institutions, and what he did in it is right here in this point. Second point you guys can talk about is modern army, and then you can put your point here. And third that I was talking is civil. You guys can talk about civil code and then put your point across and write that yes, it talked about BPL. Now what's BPL? Don't give this acronym that it's BPL. Now B stands for, you know, taking it did away with all the privileges based on birth. P stands for secure the right to property, and L stands for establish equality before law. So this is what Napoleon did in his civil code of 1804. Napoleon even simplified the administrative division. He sort of abolished the system that was not working well for the country, and even he worked for the betterment of people who were treated as slaves. They were known as serfs. So the practice of serfdom was abolished, sort of brought to an end by Napoleon. So yes, he did simplify. Here you can point on simplified administrative divisions and then quote your statement right across the point. So and then you can conclude your answer. I have given a good introduction. I have given a good answer, presented it the right way, and then I'm going to conclude it on the note that yes, despite the destruction of democracies that was done by Napoleon, he did brought out some effective administrative reforms which are still practiced across the countries world over. So that's how you're going to write the answer, and I told you what is Prob, and I'm told you what does BPL stand for. So let's jump on to the next set of questions. Explain any 4 features of Napoleonic Code. Now they've talked about 4 features of Napoleonic Code. So first, the introductory statement, like the teacher is not aware of what you're going to write here, what 4 points, like 1 point number 2, point number 3, point number 4, what points you're going to talk, she's not aware. But what you guys can do is give her a good introduction that Napoleonic Code was introduced by Napoleon in the year 1804, and this is also known as Civil Code. So these are some of the basic features that they sort of brought changes into. So the very first thing that you remember in this case, I talked about BPL, and you can define BPL, that is secured right to property, established equality before law, and did away all the privileges based on birth. So this is the first point that you're going to talk. So instead of writing something like that Napoleon probably brought out all these 3 basic reforms, what you guys can write is, put across the heading based on civil code, then you can define these 3 basic points. Second pointer that you guys are going to talk about, he abolished and the feudal system. Now when I talk about the feudal system, this basically means the privileges given to the people who were very near to the king or the nobles, and he sort of freed the peasants from their serfdom, and secured the rights of the people who were not given their due credit or privileges. Yes, he did something for their upliftment. And third important point, so what was there? In towns there were restrictions. So for example, there are some trade marks associated, there are some copyrights associated. So whenever you have a guild is a group of people who are confined to a particular job, who would never reveal their trade secrets. So they come together, they put in an effort and bring out the best. So that guild restriction was there. So every king, every territory had this guild restrictions. Every area in France would have, problem when it comes to transportation, when it comes to communication, when it comes to weights, measures, currencies. So you can divide and segregate these 2 important points, that yes, he brought about a new freedom and gave a new freedom to the businessmen by bringing in reforms, by helping them carrying out their process. That is, he sort of improved the transportation and communication, and yes, he also worked on a common currency that you guys know, and also that sort of facilitated the movement of exchange of goods. So these are all the basic points that you can summarize. In the end, you can of course conclude that Napoleon, despite being not recognized as a person who gave rights to the people for the territories he acquired, still he brought in many administrative and civil reforms that are still recognized and appreciated by the countries world over. So ensure that you give a good introduction and also a very good ending or a conclusion to your answer. On that note, let's get started with the third question. So now comes the German unification, and then we're going to talk about one question from Italian unification. And yes, don't worry, I'm going to talk about Sardinia, Piedmont anyway. So the question is, examine main features of the process of German unification. You have to talk about the main features. So I'm going to talk and underline the content that they're looking for in this answer. It's the main features of process of German unification. Not the German unification, the complete story, but whatever events took place under the leadership of Ottoman Bismarck. Okay, so the answer goes like, see, the entire story revolves around that, there was widespread discontentment in Germany, like people from middle class, they sort of tried to unite themselves to form a German confederation to bring all the divided units together so that they can have a common union. But what happened is, all this was done, and in Germany all this was done, the union was being done or established under the leadership of Prussia. So when I say yes, Prussia is one of those important states that brought about a revolutionary change in German unification. So there we had a chief minister, in Germany the chief minister is generally known as the chancellor. So this kind person, Ottoman Bismarck, he is considered as the chief architect of this entire process. So before you kickstart with your answer, please make sure that you write a very good introduction that yes, Ottoman Bismarck is considered as the chief architect of the unification, unification, or maybe German unification for that matter. And then you're going to kickstart your points that the story started that all the people came together. Then you're going to move on to the next step, that under the leadership of Prussia and its chief minister, the step was carried forward, and Prussian army and sort of bureaucracy helped the entire process. It was that they had to wage a war against Russia for 3 years. It was against Russia, it was against Denmark, it was against France. So there were not 3 years, I'm sorry, it was 3 wars that were fought for a span of 7 years, a long story, but still these people, they were determined that they're gonna come over all the upheavals, and this ended in the 7 wars. It's just 4 sections that history has. It's history, economics, pol science and geography. But these people here in Germany were so determined that okay, whatever comes our way, we are not going to give up. So yes, they fought almost 7 wars. They fought for almost 7 years. That was just 3 wars. And finally this helped in Prussian unification, the victory of Prussia, and sort of German unification. When that happened, finally in January of 1871, the Prussian king Wilhelm, he was proclaimed as the German emperor, and and this was done at the German new empire. This was done at Versailles. So all this struggle sort of shows that with the efforts of Prussian state and under the leadership of Ottoman Bismarck, who's considered as the chief architect, whatever came their way, they sort of took it on themselves, and they just moved forward, they marched forward. So the very first point that you guys are going to address in this question, let's go back and revise. When it comes to a 3-mark question, you have to mark these 4 basic points. Give the introduction that yes, Ottoman Bismarck is considered as the chief architect of German unification. Then you're going to start the story that yes, the middle class was getting agitated, and they sort of they tried to unite the different regions to have different regions of German confederation to build a nation state. And then finally Prussia took up this clause to unite Germany, and this was done under its leadership of chief minister, what you call it, Chancellor Ottoman Bismarck, helped by Prussian army, taken up by bureaucracy, the efforts, and then fighting 3 wars over a span of 7 years, with Denmark. It's how you can remember these countries. Again, there's an acronym, whatever the case may be, I have a good acronym in this case also. I'm going to share it with you. It's DAF, DUF. So Denmark, Austria and France. It's P versus DUF. So you're going to remember it this way, even if you've not read the chapter as of now or not revised. And finally, in Prussia, Wilhelm was declared as proclaimed as the head. And finally, the new German empire that was headed by Kaiser William. The ceremony was conducted at the palace of Versailles, and finally he was proclaimed as the emperor. So this is what they expect you, all the relevant information, all the important dates. So here I would like to bring to your notice, if you're not aware or if you're not very sure about the date, to be precise and exact, please don't mention the date, because that's not going to help you gain marks. It's anyway you guys are going to lose marks on that. So jumping on to the next question, that is, describe the process of unification of Germany. So now they've not explicitly mentioned to speak about or asked you to talk about Ottoman Bismarck, the contribution of Prussia, but they've asked you to describe the entire process of unification of that particular country, that's Germany. So okay, I'm gonna kickstart with the story, but again in this case you guys have to give this introduction that despite whatever case may be, it was Ottoman Bismarck, the chief minister, who was known as the chief architect of German unification. That should be your opening sentence or the opening clause, how you're going to start the answer, and then you're going to start the summary. Divide it into sections like I have done. Divide it into 3 sections if it's a 3-mark question, and you should be aware to split these 3 sections into 5 marks. 5 pointers, just in case this question has been asked for 5 marks. Okay, so the very first story, and I'm going to tell you the story. How it goes is, what happened is in 1848, you know, they sort of the first attempt, they sort of bring a first attempt to establish or to set up remove the absolute monarch and have a constitutional monarch. So what you're going to start the point with is, the very first effort was either you say that yes, a constitutional monarchy was set up under the first point, and then is, you know, explain the statement that they did this by, you know, having a parliament that met at Frankfurt. Second point, you're going to make sure that this sort of assembly that they assembled for to make sure that the German Confederation comes into shape, it made it clear that, you know, Germany is going to be unified, but that is going to be done by the combined efforts of monarchy and, you know, military support that they're going to get. That was done by landowners. So there was a, you know, assembly failed because the landowners, the monarchy and the landlords, who should probably support this entire process, they went against the middle class or the militia that stood against or the monarchy or stood for their rights. So there was a war, the assembly versus the monarch, the military, the landowners would have been in support of this. They want it like they should be supporting the country to bring the country together, to unite the people, but they never did that. They instead, you know, dismantled all the assembled people there. And finally, this effort was taken over by Ottoman Bismarck from Prussia in 1848, that I'm going to take the leadership of the movement to unify this country. And like I told you in the last question, it is Prussia versus DAF. DAF is Denmark, Austria and France, that sort of fought for 7 years, and there were 3 wars, and still Prussia did not give up, and finally it came victorious, and then Wilhelm was declared as the Emperor of German state. Okay guys, so let's jump on to the next question. This is all that you have to write. You have to give, you've talked about the parliament at Frankfurt, you've talked about the opposition the parliament had to face, by whom the opposition came, and third you talked about the efforts made by Prussia, Ottoman Bismarck and the war. So basically you've covered all the important characteristics or all the important points. So here I want to stress again, even if you don't know the entire story and you just know the pointers, anyway it's going to help you score well, because then you can frame proper sequence of event. So when it comes to social studies, please look into the clauses like what led to the movement, what was the sequence of events, what followed, what were the important dates in that case. So I'm again mentioning it right here. If you guys are not very sure about the dates or the month and you're not very sure that it's gonna work, please don't write it. Please don't take the risk to mention the date and give opportunity to your teacher to, you know, reduce your marks or deduct your marks. So jumping on to the next important question, that's Italy. Now imagine I don't know anything about Italy. Anyway, what I'm going to do is, now I don't know anything about Italy, so what basic overview I'm going to give here is, I'm going to divide it, like write it here, Italy, and then it was divided into 7 states, chucked into 3 sections. Middle section was ruled by the Pope. the southern section was more, dominated by Spain, and the topmost section, it was ruled by Austria-Habsburg Empire. So this is what I know, and I'm going to mention it right here, that this is the division, right? So apart from Sardinia, Piedmont, that was the only state that was ruled by the Italian state. Every other state was ruled by some or the other person or some of the other kingdom that did not had any links with Italy. So what happened? So I have given a very clear overview that yes, I know the contents of this answer, that Italy was divided into 7 states. Divided it further, you can segregate into 3 sections, that yes, the topmost section was ruled by Austria, then Pope, and then Spain, it was ruled by the Spain sort of ruled the southernmost section where peasants revolted. So what is the process of unification? See, Italy had basically a very long history of that political division, 7 divisions, and then just Sardinia, Piedmont was the state. So I'm going to underline here that Sardinia, Piedmont was the only state that was ruled by Victor Emmanuel II, who became, Italy was basically, I would say, a multinational empire. So under the efforts of this person Mazzini, that sort of had 2 secret societies, was sent to exile. Yes guys, I'm talking about that person who was a revolutionary. So he sort of tried to unite Italy by setting up 2 secret societies. Now they were known as Young Italy, but however his efforts sort of failed. He was sent to exile. He didn't know, his actions were not respected to the extent they should have been. So finally all this responsibility after the failure of Mazzini got onto the shoulders of Victor Emmanuel II. So because he had that state that had links with Italy, the house had been connected with Italian states, so his shoulders, he had that responsibility on his shoulders to bring together all the states to have Italian unification. So he bought out every possibility, he checked on every possibility to track the political and to gain the political and economic gain, so that the country could be brought together and unified on some guidelines. So that is the entire process that you guys gonna follow. There's a complete story. You have mentioned all the important features, all the important characters associated with the story, and you've also talked about the division in Italy. So there's nothing that you've left. You've given a view of how Italy was ruled, you've given the content, and then you're gonna get marks anyway. Let's jump on to the next question. Okay, so some part again of Italy is left. So 2 pointers are left, I'm sorry. So what happened is Cavour was the chief minister, because Sardinia Piedmont has this responsibility. So Cavour sort of took the movement to the next level. So because he was aware of the French language, so he sort of established an alliance with the French people and sort of defeated Austria. Garibaldi, after just remember gig, it's G-I-G. Now what's gig? This is what is the G stand for. In this case, G is the first G you can give to Garibaldi, then I stands for Italy, and the other G, of course, it stands for this person, that is Giuseppe Mazzini. Now here I wanted to make sure that you guys know that you can remember it with acronyms. Now the acronym related to Italy is going to be GIG, right? It's going to be Mazzini, then it's going to be Italy, then it's going to be Garibaldi, right? And the acronym related to Germany was anyway DUF. They had that fight, 7-year fight for a span with almost 3 wars, defeating and Prussia coming victorious out of that. So what happened is, because Sardinia Piedmont had the responsibility, Cavour took up the responsibility that okay, I'm going to do something. He took France towards his side and sort of defeated Austria in 1859. Finally, what happened is, the Garibaldi, he sort of got support of all those local peasants. Like I told you that the southernmost section was ruled by Spanish people, and they were outthrown by the efforts of Garibaldi, who got the support of all the local peasants there. And finally, the Victor Emmanuel was declared as the Emperor of Italy in 1861. So let's get started with the revision of this answer. A very important question, can be asked in 5 marks. So I'm going to give you a complete overview of the story. So the very first is Italy divided into 7 states, split into 3 sections. Only Italian states, the next relevant information is that you guys can underline here is, only Italian state was Sardinia Piedmont, ruled by Victor Emmanuel II. Mazzini sort of tried to bring changes or unify Italy, but however his efforts were not acknowledged and he was sent to exile, and he even did come up with 2 important revolutionary societies or secret societies to bring change. And then the entire responsibility, because Mazzini's efforts anyway failed, so the entire responsibility for it actually fell on the shoulders of Victor Emmanuel, who was crowned as the emperor because of his chief ministers, and Garibaldi, who sort of got the local support of the peasants and overthrew the Spanish rulers and unified Italy as a country. So you have this answer, and let's jump on to the next question. Now the next question is, describe any 4 measures. Now they've clearly asked you to describe 4 measures which were introduced by French revolutionaries. Now they're going to talk about French revolutionaries to create a sense of collective identity among the people. Now you're going to talk about how people would associate themselves, what is going to be the collective identity. This is going to be answered. You're going to give a good introduction that French Revolution brought about changes across the globe by introducing liberty, concept of liberty, equality and fraternity. But in this case, you guys also have to understand that a sense of collective identity can only be brought in a classroom if we guys order a pizza, or maybe some soft drinks for that matter, or you guys get hold of Domino's McPuff, whatever. Like, it's like you guys have to feel associated, you have to feel connected with that. So similarly, in order to bring in the people together from France, they sort of brought a few changes. For example, setting up a common identity that they can associate with. To kickstart with, see, there have been various practices across the globe to use allegory concept, that is associate an image as a national identity, and so did France use the opportunity. So they sort of used these 2 words, the idea of fatherland, please underline, that is la patrie, and the idea of citizen, that is les citoyens, that sort of brought a common identity among the people living in that country, that they're going to have or enjoy the set of equal rights that's going to be given to them under the constitution, guidelines of the constitution. They sort of brought a set of measures and practices that people could associate with themselves and create an identity image. Third important point that you guys are going to give in this case is the French flag. So our country or you guys in the class associate with that teacher, your class teacher, or anyone for that matter. Similarly, it's the French flag, the tricolor flag, that was chosen to replace the existing monarchical presence. So they sort of, they introduced common identity for everyone, they sort of introduced a common symbol, and they also created an assembly of the people that they could associate with. That's the National Assembly. So the Estates General that was there, that was the estate divided into 3 estates, the nobles, the common man, So they sort of dismantled all that system and introduced a national assembly that had its own people. The people could associate with that assembly, and they thought, okay, we are not going to have the concept of estates general. And finally oaths were taken, hymns were sung, and then martyrs were commemorated. Their contribution towards the freedom struggle was appreciated in a big way. So these are all the important points that you guys have to quote and underline in your answer. For example, in this case, what you're going to underline is a French flag. In this case, you're going to answer Estates General renamed, and then in this case, martyrs commemorated. So this is what brought a sense of common identity among the people living in France. So let's jump on to the next question. Okay, before I jump on to the next question, can anybody probably answer what is the acronym associated with, okay, Germany? Let's try for Germany. Okay, that clicked your mind, good. So it's DUF, and the acronym associated with Napoleon is TRUB. The acronym associated with Italy is going to be GIG. Now let's talk about this particular question, that how culture plays an important role in creating the idea of nation, especially in the countries like Europe that were never they never existed with the concept of nation state. They were all separate, they were all disintegrated. So explain it by giving 4 examples. Now, when India had its Swadeshi movement, when there was partition of Bengal, so it was basically that cultural tinge that worked best for the people. You guys can associate with the other person. You probably send songs, you honor the other person with a song, a picture. That's all how you greet each other when it's the birthday. Like, it's like that connect, that feeling that's gonna work. So similarly, the culture and the people getting connected with each other, it plays a very important role to bring in that sense of identity in the people, that sense of belongingness to the country. So you have to give 4 examples. See, this is where they ask or talk about romanticism that is given in your book. So when I talk about romanticism, it's not going to talk about science and technology, but yes, it talks a lot about your culture, about your emotions and how you deal with it. So the feeling of nationalism was basically strengthened, developed and encouraged by the use of music, literature, drama and art. So that is all how you guys also associate with each other. It's not the other way around that studies, science, social, maths is going to work for you. No, it's always that hip hop songs, that the movies, the art forms. The more you get music classes, the more you get co-curricular activities, you feel associated with it a lot, and so did the people. So it's very easy for you to remember that yes, romanticism is about that feeling of art, music, literature. Now, so in all this context, we come to know that all these stuff that have their feelings attached, it sort of played a very important role. And the 4 examples that I'm going to give is, before I jumped into the 4 examples, I gave a very clear definition of what they're expecting out of the answer. So the very first case that you have is, you're going to talk about and underline the fact, for example, the German philosopher John Gottfried, he believed that German culture, if you have to bring in a sense of common identity, culture, you have to bring the people together. You have to name it after them. So he sort of discovered it's like true German culture can only come into shape or take place when you have the people together, the common people together. And John Gottfried, he was associated, or the common people were known as Das Volk. So underline the first point. It's like common identity, common people getting acceptance, getting popularity. Second important case that we're going to talk is the language. For example, Russia occupied Poland, and it refused, restricted the people to use Polish language, because it was so scared that if it's going to use the Polish language, they're going to spread it, it's going to act as a weapon of nationalism, and it's going to spread like wildfire. All of them, they're going to stand up, speak against the Russian rule and sort of stuff like that. So what happened is, in this case, the people in Poland sort of secretly used language as their very smart weapon to do away with the Russian rule, throw them out. And so that is what you're going to underline in this question, that Polish language was used as a weapon when Russia occupied Poland. Next point you're going to talk about is, in Germany also there's another point that you can separate out, that in Germany, Grimm brothers. Now what they did is, the Grimm brothers, in order to get attention of that local people, they sort of started narrating those folk tales that were written in German language, so that people could feel and have a feeling that they've been discriminated by the French authority, and they can associate it with the tales that they are narrated. Similarly, this person Carroll, he made use of operas and music, especially the folk tales out there, that worked to his benefit. So he sort of gathered people, the momentum of the people with this operas and music, so that played again an important weapon to bring people together. So talking of all the important points, operas was promoted by Polish Karol Kropotkin. So I'll summarize the important point in this case, that yes, the dance performances, the folk tales, the music, the art, the literature, it formed a very important tool when it comes to national symbols and helps to bring all the people together. So if you're going to skip, if it's a 5-mark question, you've already talked about Carol, you've talked about Grimm brothers, you've talked about Russian language, you've also talked about the German philosopher, and you've also given a point related to Romanticism. So you have just nailed it, guys. That's all what the answer is supposed to look like, and it should not exceed, guys, please try not to exceed 120 words. So let's summarize it once again. So this answer is expecting you to talk about Romanticism. So they've explicitly not mentioned in this case that they want an answer on this line of Romanticism, but yes, you can answer it with the context of Romanticism. Talk about John Grotfield, talk about Grimm brothers, talk about Polish language, talk about Carol, and then summarize your answer. Okay, the next question is, how did Romanticism, that we just talked about, how did Romanticism seek to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiments during 18th century? So we've had a good discussion on this topic, that yes, it criticized the concept of reason, the concept of science, and rather focused more on emotions, all that emotions, intuitions, literature, art, culture, so that people could have a sense of shared collective heritage, identity. They could connect with the past, bring nationalist feeling together. So whatever examples we gave in the last question, I want you to summarize those 4 points in bullets, and please avoid not to write in the form of a paragraph. I would request you guys, since you've been asked to give good examples, please use bullet points so that your teacher comes to know that you've underlined all the important concepts. Okay guys, getting started on to the next question that says, so we've talked about it, just talked about it in the last question. The same answer is going to fit here. Okay, examine the role of women in nationalist struggle of Europe. May it be household, may it be your private life, may it be your public life, or anywhere, women at times are not given their due share, their due credit that they should have and be given. So yes, women have contributed a lot in struggle of nationalism and bring freedom to the country, get due share of rights. They have had a long history of struggle, may it be related to their voting rights, may it be related to their workplace credits, equal wages and whatnot. So in this answer, you're going to start your answer that yes, women had to wage a war for their rights, but their contribution towards the nationalist struggle of Europe can also not be ignored. And then you're going to start your answer that women had been demanding the political rights during there were sort of liberal movements that they talked about. So the very first point that you're going to underline here is they have been actively participating in national struggle. Second, they set up their own political association. The second important point is that yes, they have set up their own association, newspapers. They talked a lot in their political meetings and demonstrations, and despite the fact that they were denied their voting rights or suffrage rights, their struggle continued through every phase of nationalism. May it be supporting their co-partners when they leave for the war, and so being a support back at their place to be the breadwinner of the family, may it be at war, may it be to spread the nationalist sentiments. Yes, their contribution has been, they have contributed immensely in that case, right? So on that note, I'm gonna end this set of questionnaire. I hope you guys have enjoyed the class, and I want to bring to your notice that you can download the PDF link for this PDF, the PDF link from the app that's right there in the description box. With that, what you guys gonna get is the app link is going to be there in the description box. You can have you can ask doubts, you can get free access to the videos, and you can also get free study material from there, which is anyway going to help you with your board exams. So till the time we meet next, please stay healthy, take care and stay hydrated. Bye bye, take care. Thank you guys.